Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the beginning of Day 3 of the 2020 ARF Audience Times Science Conference. I'm Jay Mattlin, the Director of the the ARF Council Program. This session on new developments in context effects research has been curated by the Context Effects Working Group of the ARF Cognition Council, whose roster you see here. As you can see, 2 of today's speakers are members of that group. Our speakers today are Bill Harvey, who many of you know, who's chairman of RMT and a previous winner of the ARF's Erwin Efron Demystification Award. Kimberly Rose Clark, senior lecturer at Dartmouth and co-founder and CRO of Merchant Mechanics, and Robin Garfield, EVP of Research and Scheduling at CNN and a former colleague of mine. The panel will be introduced by my current colleague, Dr. Horst Stipp, the ARF's EVP of Research and Innovation, who will open with some remarks about the context of these context effects presentations. There will be some time at the end for questions, and so if you have any, please click on the chat button at the bottom and type them in, and now I will turn it over to Horst.
Thanks, Jay. Hello, everybody. So to make sure we're all on the same page, I'd like to briefly describe what we mean by context effects. So let's first define context. All advertisements are seen in context. Context is usually regarded as a media space. That could be a TV program, a website, radio, music stream, or a magazine story. Our ads can also be context. So for example, in a commercial pod on TV, the ad next to your ad are context. Now for some researchers and advertisers, they also look at a broader kind of context. So the medium, the device, the platform, the media brand, and also consumer attitudes, their frame of mind, even culture and economy, they too are context for an ad. Now, that brings us to the effects, context effects. There are 60 years of research, and it shows that ad context is likely to affect ad performance, both positively and negatively. Now, most research has been on the effects of TV programs on commercials, but context effects have also been shown for all media, including digital. Based on these findings from all these studies, many marketers have developed strategies to take advantage of context to make their ads more effective. Now, we organized this event because there's now renewed interest in context effects for 2 reasons. First, advertisers want to avoid negative context effects. That's the whole brand safety issue. The second reason is programmatic strategies are focused on targeting, not context. That has raised the question whether it's okay to ignore or neglect context. So let's discuss how do context effects come about. Now, researchers have discussed many processes that trigger context effects, but I think we can put them into 2 main categories. There's attention transfer and priming and halo effects. So let's take a closer look first at attention transfer. What do we mean by attention transfer? Well, attention transfer means that attention to content is likely to transfer to the ad adjacent to the content. More attention to content usually means more attention to the ad. Similarly, it also means that highly valued content and a trusted media brand, for example, usually result in the ad and the advertiser to be seen more positively. Attention transfer has been established in many studies. In fact, our 3rd presenter today, Robin, will show new data confirming this finding. That brings us to the second context effect trigger. And now things are getting a little bit more complicated. These are the priming and halo effects. Most research shows that alignment or congruence between context and ad are likely to improve ad performance. Our 3 presenters today all have found evidence for the power of alignment. And most marketers apply alignment strategies, such as endemic, native, and product placement. And at our conferences, many marketers have shown for example, that when the context and their ad evoked similar emotions, the ad performed better. However, there are some open questions, and they are the focus of our presenters today. First one is this: how can advertisers optimize alignment to maximize benefits? Both our first and third presenters, namely Bill and Robin, have new insights on that, new insights on how to make your ad more effective through this alignment, through the optimization of alignment. The other issue is this: why have some studies shown that a lack of alignment did not have a negative impact on ad performance? Our second presenter, Kimberly, will report very intriguing findings from her study on that specific issue. Now, with that, it is my pleasure to hand it over to our first presenter, Bill Harvey.
Thanks, Horst. The positive effects of context alignment now has been third-party validated against real-world, in-market, hard business outcomes at scale. It had already been validated against ad communication measures in 70 previous studies, consistently finding about a 15% lift in measures such as ad recall when an ad was placed in a psychologically resonant environment. These 70 studies used relatively simple content coding rules, such as happy and sad, serious and funny. We wanted to avoid a subjective choice of content codes and find the content codes that would be the most effective. So we put all the psychological words in the English language, about 13,000 of them, through a rigorous scientific process described in our paper that winnowed them down to the most behavior predictive 265 content codes we call driver tags. These 265 can be grouped for analysis and targeting into 86 need states or 15 motivations. In a Nielsen NCS study of over 200,000 households, this driver tag system has been third-party validated to raise advertising sales effect by much more than the 15% for just ad recall achieved by the first generation of alignment. Probably because we're measuring alignment across 265 dimensions empirically derived, rather than one or two simple content coding dimensions. Driver tags were also third-party validated by 605 in this study involving 21 million households and 23,000 re-interviews measuring brand effects. This is a breakout of that same 605 study, which finds that even one ad exposure can have high effect if it's placed in a psychologically resonant context. This curve, derived from the Nielsen NCS study, shows that there is a negative effect to low resonance. Note the left-hand side of the graph where the non-resonant placements yielded low sales effects. This answers one of Horst's questions left unanswered by earlier studies. With our partners, Samasio and Reset Digital, we use driver tags to reach people motivated by the subconscious motivators in an ad through a context that helps the ad further. We call that empathy targeting. We discover what the motivations of an individual are by tracking the content they consume online, all behind a privacy shield, of course. Reset Digital can even personalize the ad to that targeted individual in real-time bidding, programmatic, at a scale of 276 million Americans. And that also affects the forms of TV called OTT and CTV. Our conclusion is that context ad alignment has now been amply proven to work, especially the driver tag system, which determines alignment on multiple psychological dimensions. We recommend that marketers take advantage of alignment and empathy targeting, both methods based on your specific ad. Thank you. Now, it's my pleasure to pass the baton to Kimberly Clark.
Hi, my name is Kimberly Clark. I am a professor at Dartmouth College, and I am Chief Research Officer at Merchant Mechanics. And today I want to talk about a Dartmouth study entitled Economic Framing to Better Tune Ad Media and Ad Context Alignments at Auction. So I want to start off with a teachable moment. I want to talk about metamerism. Metamerism is a phenomenon that occurs when two colors that are not actually the same appear the same under different lighting conditions. This is a psychophysical property where different contexts allow us to perceive the same objects differently. And in the same vein, emotional or affective contexts work to frame how we process ads. Broadcast context, for example, contain different emotional dimensions, as Bill had recognized, that frame the viewer's perception of the advertisements that follow it. In other words, the emotions felt during broadcast content carry over, as Horst had mentioned, into the advertisement, reshaping the way viewers process ads. This means that the same ad can be perceived differently by different people depending on the broadcast content that preceded it. And I think of this as more of an emotional metamerism. Never before in programmatic auctions has had the capacity to utilize these types of emotional context between media and advertising to better tune ad buying and selling algorithms for optimal content alignments. The current issue is how exactly to measure this congruence between the context and ad when emotions can be so subtle and nuanced and interpreted differently by different viewers. Emotions can be considered more objectively in classifying ad buys and sells when we remove the subjectivity of identifying emotions in show and ad content. Now, over decades, economists Kahneman and Tversky have repeatedly shown individuals feel future losses much more strongly than they do equivalent future gains. So if we choose to classify content on the strength of its loss framing or gain framing, we can more accurately align the media and ad content by weighting auction algorithms with this type of information. But which alignments work best using this model based on gain and loss framing? So this study, we have measured a number of brain and body responses in real time during the viewing of different combinations of content and ad alignments focused on gain and loss. We conducted this research to determine which alignment combinations maintain the greatest in-moment attention, engagement, and emotional resonance as a function of the lens of consumer neuroscience. Video clips from the long-running reality show Survivor, along with a variety of advertisements, were used in the study. Half of the show and ad content focused on gains, content in the show focused on winning some future in-game award, and ads focused on the benefits that could be had if a certain product was purchased. And on the flip side, the other half of the content focused on future loss. So content in the show focused on future losing or being voted off the island, and the ads focused on the impending loss if the viewer did not buy the product, so it's a FOMO moment. And participants viewed 4 conditions of these gain and loss pairings: gain-gain, gain-loss, loss-gain, and loss-loss. This allowed us to assess success metrics based on congruence across show and ad, as well as specific effects of incongruent pairings. Through eye tracking, we found the greatest increase in visual attention to ad following show content came when gain-framed advertisements followed loss-framed broadcast content. Using facial coding, we found an increase in positive emotional affect during gain-framed ads that followed gain-framed content. And this can be thought of a kicker effect or an emotional amplification of the broadcast content's gain focus. Following the study, self-reported brand recall was greatest in conditions where there was not an alignment as defined by economic framing. In other words, the incongruent pairings were more effective in unaided recall. Now, within real-time brain responses, an analytical process known as intersubject functional connectivity, or ISFC, is a measure of the entire test audience's brain regions that share time-locked activity to video-based content. Intersubject correlation is a measure of the similarity of brain activity of a group of people as they respond to the same stimulus, such as media. This is a relatively new measure of audience engagement within academic research in neuroscience. The alpha band signal here from electroencephalography, or EEG, is a widely accepted to be an indicator of alertness or a motivated attentional state. And here we found the greatest shared alpha response occurred when the gain-framed ad followed loss-framed show content. Using ISFC within a different channel of EEG, we found the greatest shared response and gamma wave activity occurred when gain-framed ads followed loss-framed content as well. Now, gamma power in EEG is widely believed to underlie the awareness of surrounding stimuli and the ability to unite different features of an experience into a conscious percept. So this is really at the root of engagement. It's also been implicated in memory performance and maintenance. So to identify the right recommendations for brands based on our findings, the brands must first identify the main goal of the ad's performance with the audience. Do they want to increase the brand's engagement? Do they want to increase the positive emotional associations for the brand? Or do they want to increase brand recall? Once this is understood, this economic framing of content and ads can be used to best tune the desired alignment. Ads that are focused on benefits of future gains of products maintains strong audience engagement when presented after show content that is focused on loss, like negative news that Robin will talk about. Positive emotions are strongest during gain-framed ads when followed by congruent gain-framed or positively focused content. Most importantly, the takeaway here is that misalignment, as Horst had said, is not necessarily a bad thing. Increases in brand recall and memory encoding were greatest in the misaligned conditions. And with that, I will turn it over to Robin.
Thanks, Kimberly. And thanks for having me. Today I'm going to talk about the value of advertising in news, how it works, and why I often say that brands should avoid news at their own peril. They should run to it. So first, a little background. Cable news viewing is higher than it's ever been. You know, through the years, you can see strong jumps in performance for big news events, but now, while linear TV viewing is in decline, 2020 cable news viewership is at an unprecedented high. And I should say that digital news is also seeing record audiences too. The reason is pretty simple. There's a lot going on in the world, and news consumers are information seekers. They want to be educated and feel empowered. They watch by choice. They're comforted by having essential information needed to live their lives and make decisions. They actually enjoy it. Knowledge is power, and it's fun. Furthermore, they're very engaged. They pay close attention to the content. As they say, they have a keen eye, they're vigilant, and they're focused. And as a result, you see the familiar story here. Attention to news leads to higher ad and brand recall within that news. But there's also a myth, which is that hard and political news is not a good place for advertising. Yet the reality is that serious news generates at least as much ad and brand impact as entertainment, with no negative effect on the brands at all. And I'm not talking about soft news here. I'm talking about the hard and political news that many advertisers are afraid of. So let's talk about how that works. It's really all about personal values and how they relate to the three important campaign components: brands, ads, and content. So first, values, which is a core element of the proprietary work that at CNN we call the news frontier. Working closely with Pressnicker Research, we did what we call a digital ethnography, which is basically an ethnography that we did digitally, and that was before the pandemic. I'm sure all ethnographies are now done digitally. Anyway, we identified, through that work, we ultimately identified 12 frames or values that people use to make sense of the world. As you can see here, looking at them, a lot of it is about morality and politics. And there's some ideological leanings, but it's not strictly about that. Here's an example of one of those, which is if we're not winning, we're losing. So this is the belief that life is a zero-sum game and that someone else's win or gain automatically engenders a loss to others. An example of that is like the constant condemnation of the other side to achieve success. Though it can be misunderstood as being overly competitive and having a lack of empathy. And as you can see here, it tends to skew a little more to the right and a little older. right? So there are 12 of these, and that's really the human element, the values that people have. The second area is the brand. So brands are actually a lot like people. So they're not just about their products and services, but brands also have values that extend to their business practices and their views of the world. And 76% of consumers care about these values, the kinds of things that you see here. And in fact, brands are expected to take a stand on these values in their advertising, which is a key mode for communicating these things. And in fact, communicating values is so important to consumers that brand perception will actually improve if consumers see their values reflected in an ad. So here's an example of a diagnostic that we've done on an ad based on this work. So you see there's a retail brand here that features a wide array of values. And the brand values and the ad values are very similar. And you can see that consumers recognize the consistency of those values. And as a result, ad appeal and brand perception are up, and across broadly and across the entire political spectrum. What happens when news enters to the mix? How does that work? So during news viewing, consumers are more connected and reflective and frankly self-aware. Their values and beliefs are being triggered more than with any other content genre. 75% of people feel that way. You kind of think of it as values are on the surface. They're wearing them on their sleeves. And as a result, what's happening is that news actually has a magnifying effect on the advertising, where consumers are recognizing their values too and appreciate when they are positioned in a positive way. And this is really good news because advertisers can actually thrive in these current times where we have a very divided nation with values-based advertising. And they don't have to worry about whether the ads match the specific storyline in the content, whether it's on the left or the right or positive or negative, just really that their ads are effectively presenting their brand values so they can connect with those consumers that hold those values. News also drives action. News consumers are a really heightened state of interest and empowerment and are motivated to take action in support of their values when they're watching news. And that's why cause-related advertising works really well in news. You can already see strong engagement from all of the work here, which was in 2019. The truth is we're doing a lot more work on this kind of purpose-driven advertising now, and in this kind of new environment, we would expect the effects to be even stronger. So finally, in summary, these are really the key points and how news advertising actually works. First and foremost, it's really important to remember that consumers choose news. It's essential, it's empowering, they enjoy it. It makes the people who are interested in engaging it feel better. And the engagement in the news content promotes attention to advertising. That's the part we've always known. But what's really new in this work is that the heightened awareness that people have for their values in news actually magnifies the connections that consumers have with the ad campaigns and brands. And that's what really makes it work. And purpose-driven advertising is particularly, in fact, impactful because when consumers want to act on those impulses, on those feelings, they have a way to do that. And so it's really the news content itself that drives the lift in the ad effect. Consumers have comfort in the knowledge. It's not really about kind of collateral mood repair, and it's really about the amplification of brand effects, not the need for brand safety. That's really an unfounded concern. Ultimately, it's all about the values. That's it. Thank you.